So, you spent the last chapter mastering the essential tools of the microbiology lab, right? You know your way around a microscope, you can prep slides, and you've got those staining techniques down. Well, now that we actually have the technical skills to peer into that microscopic world, we're ready to dive right into the universal subjects sitting just under that lens. Today, in this explainer, we are looking at the foundational architecture of life itself, the universal blueprint of the cell. To do that, we'll hit 5 key areas. First, the universal cellular blueprint. Then, building the microscopic machine. Next, 2 fundamental cellular designs, followed by defining the properties of life. And finally, active survival and defense. All right, Section 1, the universal cellular blueprint and its unifying characteristics. The really fascinating thing about biology is that despite the absolute sheer diversity of life out there, there's a common baseline. Whether an organism is just this solitary unicellular entity fighting for its life in a harsh environment, or a highly specialized cell embedded deep within complex multicellular tissue, they all share a fundamental unifying architecture. As future healthcare professionals, you constantly have to ask yourself, what exactly are we looking at under the microscope? Because, you aren't just looking at abstract blobs. You're looking at 3-dimensional, highly organized boundary layers of life. Understanding these structures is absolutely crucial. When you're treating an infection or battling a disease, you're interacting directly with these microscopic entities. You literally need to know how they're built so you can understand how to dismantle them, or in some cases, support them. And when you actually look through your lenses at this common baseline, you'll generally categorize what you see into some basic geometric shapes. First up, you have your spherical cells, which are scientifically termed coccus. Then you have your cubical shapes. And finally, you have these elongated cylindrical forms known as a rod or bacillus. Recognizing these geometries? That is step 1 in identifying the actual organisms you're going to encounter in clinical samples. Moving on to Section 2, building the microscopic machine and its core components. Let's build this thing piece by piece. If we were to construct a universal biological machine completely from scratch, the very first thing we need is a perimeter. This is the plasma membrane. Think of this as the ultimate security gate. It's a selective fluid-lipid bilayer boundary that completely surrounds the internal environment of the cell, and its primary job is absolutely critical. It regulates the precise transport of necessary nutrients into the cell while pumping toxic metabolic wastes out. It is highly selective. That means it meticulously controls exactly what gets a VIP pass inside and what is strictly barred from entry. Now, once we have that boundary set up, what fills the inside? Well, that be the cytoplasmic matrix. You see, the internal volume of the cell isn't just empty space, it's completely filled with cytoplasm. This is a concentrated, incredibly nutrient-dense aqueous gel, and it acts as the primary substrate for almost all biochemical transformations. It is the busy, fluid factory floor where the actual work of life takes place. But every factory needs a master blueprint, right? And for the cell, that is its genetic material. Cells utilize a genome composed of double-stranded DNA, which is arranged in 1 or more chromosomes. This DNA stores literally all the hereditary instructions required for every single cellular structure and function. Now, for those of you heading into medicine, listen up. This is vital. This is the absolute core code of the biological machine, and because of that, it is a primary target for numerous antimicrobial drugs and therapies. Of course, having a blueprint is pretty much useless without a construction crew, and that is exactly where the protein synthesis machinery comes in. All cells contain abundant ribosomes. These are specialized ribozyme complexes that act as the true workforce of the cell. They read the genetic mRNA codes transcribed from the DNA and actively translate them into functional polypeptides, the proteins that will actually build the cell's physical structures and carry out its enzymatic work. And here's a crucial clinical takeaway. Because bacterial ribosomes differ slightly from human ones, they're actually one of our absolute best targets for antibiotics. Okay, Section 3. 2 fundamental cellular designs, also known as the Great Divergence. So while all cells share those universal components we just built, the evolutionary tree basically forks into one of 2 distinct architectural paths that strictly categorize all cellular life. On one hand, you have prokaryotic cells. These are your simpler, non-compartmentalized architectures. Think bacteria and archaea. Everything is kind of mixed together in one big, open floor plan. On the other hand, you have eukaryotic cells. These boast a highly complex, compartmentalized architecture with defined organelles. It's like having tiny walled-off rooms within a much larger factory. Human cells, fungi, and parasites, they all fall into this more complex category. Let's jump into Section 4, defining the properties of life and seeing the machine in motion. Up until now, we've mostly looked at cellular anatomy. Now, let's shift over to physiology, hit the power button, and watch this microscopic machine operate in real time. To be scientifically defined as a living thing, a cell must exhibit 6 essential physiological properties. We've got reproduction and heredity, growth and development, active cellular metabolism, movement and irritability, support and protection, and finally, nutrient and waste transport. Let's quickly break down what these actually look like in action. Notice how cells maintain entirely independent metabolic capabilities. Active cellular metabolism is essentially the sum of all synchronized chemical and physical life processes happening within the cell. It involves generating its own power, synthesizing ATP, by combining the catabolic breakdown of external nutrients with the anabolic synthesis of complex cellular components. This is the engine of life, just constantly humming along. Next up, the capacity to perpetuate a lineage pairs directly with coordinated maturation. Reproduction is how an organism transmits its DNA genome to its offspring, whether that's through asexual binary fission, like we see in bacteria, or through more complex sexual replication pathways. Growth and development naturally follow this. This is the systematic, permanent increase in cell mass and volume, all driven by carefully regulated gene expression. We also have to remember that life is never truly static. Organisms actively interact with their surroundings. Movement and irritability refer to the capacity of the cell to actually sense changes in its internal or external environment and then execute targeted responses. Often, this includes autonomous self-propulsion. So, if a bacterium senses a toxic chemical or a rich nutrient source, it uses specialized structures to actively swim away from the danger or right toward the fruit. Moving to our final section, Section 5, Active Survival and Defense, Preparing for Battle. A cell doesn't just exist. It has to fight to stay alive in an environment that is constantly trying to tear it apart. A massive part of staying alive is managing what crosses that border we talked about. Nutrient and waste transport is an active, continuous defense against both starvation and toxicity. The cell utilizes highly coordinated transport mechanisms across its boundary layers to consistently pull critical raw chemical building blocks into the interior while actively and quickly expelling metabolic waste products that would otherwise build up and completely poison the cell. But beyond just managing borders, the cell also has to physically armor itself. Support and protection relies on the synthesis of specialized structures. This includes building external cell walls, storage vacuoles to hoard resources for harsh times, and dense granules or protective inclusions. These structures provide the necessary mechanical stability to keep that incredibly delicate internal machinery safe from physical crushing forces and chemical attacks. Which leaves us with a pretty critical question to ponder. If all cells share this incredibly delicate internal machinery, how do the simpler, non-compartmentalized prokaryotes, like the bacteria you'll be studying to treat infections, manage to insulate themselves from devastating environmental forces, like massive osmotic stress? The answer lies on the very outer limits of their structure, which sets us up perfectly to explore the incredibly complex world of the bacterial cell envelope in our next explainer.